Hello everyone, welcome to Lockdown Seas World. Today we talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which was so close to a global nuclear war. From Miami, Florida to the southwest, there is an island named Key West. That's the most south point of America. A good place to see the sunset and also hometown for American novelist Ernest Hemingway. 90 miles or 145 kilometers from here to the south is Cuba. It's one of the few socialist countries in the world. Cuba is the largest country in Caribbean Sea. It consists of 2,000 islands, about the size of 110,000 square kilometers. It had been a Spanish colony, and after 1898, the Spanish-American War, it was under U.S. control in politics and the economy. In 1959, a revolution broke out in Cuba, and the uprising led by Fidel Castro overthrew the dictatorship of Batista government. Initially, Castro was just a nationalist, not against America, and was also invited by President Eisenhower to visit Washington. Later, Cuba nationalized the land and the private business, impeded the American interest. And many exiles from Cuba came to America and conspired to topple Castro by force. American government provided military assistance to them, and the CIA tried many times to assassinate Castro. In April 1961, U.S. newly elected President John Kennedy approved the action by U.S. military and CIA, organized 1,400 Cuban exiles, and provided 8 transportation airports, 14 bombers, and 10 landing vehicles. They landed at the Peak Bay and tried to topple the Castro government. In the following 3 days, the rebels were killed or captured. The plan was foiled, which made Washington a victim of accusation and ridicule, and the Kennedy administration was greatly embarrassed. To deal with U.S. further aggression, Castro turned to the Soviet Union for help, and Moscow accepted quickly. At that time, America and Soviet were under global confrontation and rivalry, military and politics, and also in economy and technology. As early October 1st, 1957, the Soviet launched the first satellite. In 1958, America established NASA. In July 1959, the Soviets succeeded in launching the first moon probe, and on April 12, 1961, a Soviet astronaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human who journeyed in outer space. America and NATO bolstered containment and military deterrence to the Soviet, and deployed cubic medium-range ballistic missiles in Turkey that cover 2,400 kilometers. That missile could deliver heat to Moscow. And the Soviet also considered countermeasures, and Cuba's calling for help just made the Soviet step into the backyard of America. From July 1962, and Moscow assisted Cuba with all military equipment, including dozens of jet fighters and bombers, medium-range missiles that armed with nuclear warheads that covered almost the whole America. Soviet's nuclear submarines cruised at Caribbean Sea and also sent 4,000 military personnel to Cuba. On October 14, 1962, American U-2 surveillance aircraft discovered Soviet missile bases and a launch site in Cuba. And the Kennedy administration immediately summoned National Security Council to deal with the emergency. Following the discussion, there were 6 solutions had been made, and 3 of them are in serious consideration. First is military actions of attacking and taking over Cuba. Second is bombardment to the missile site to erase the threat. The third is a complete blockade to Cuba all around. Kennedy finally took the advice from Defense Secretary McNamara that blockade first and then global military alarm and readiness. During the following 13 days from October 5th to 28th, 1962, America maneuvered 68 Air Force squadrons, 8 carrier groups, and 180 battleships blockaded Cuba, monitored and searched all the Soviet ships to Cuba. Faced with U.S. threatening, Soviet leader Khrushchev finally succumbed to compromise and agreed to call back all its missiles in Cuba. He also asked America to give up its invasion to Cuba and dismantling the Cuban missiles in Turkey. America then ended its blockade and averted the escalation of the crisis that might lead to a global nuclear war. How American government and National Security Council made the assessment and the policy was a classical case study in international relations theory on crisis management and policy making. The book of Essence of Decision explaining the Cuban Missile Crisis by American scholar Graham Allison is highly recommended. In a Cuban Missile Crisis, America and the Soviet played key roles. Yet Cuba, as an independent sovereignty, its national security was under grave threat, and it protested to Americans for its aggression and nuclear threatening. Meanwhile, it complained the Soviets' setback and withdrew without discussing with it. The Chinese government sternly supported Cuba and condemned Washington for the danger it made to the world. At the same time, China also criticized Khrushchev's policy as irresponsible, adventurism, and timid escape. That's a behavior of speculation. The Soviet and some European socialist countries, and including Italy, blamed China for its recklessness and belligerence of stirring up a global nuclear war. The argument and the clash further divided the socialist bloc. And 2 years later, in October 1964, the Soviet leader Khrushchev was ousted, and China succeeded its first test of atomic bomb. When all the people focused on U.S.-Soviet rivalry at a Cuban Missile Crisis on Western Hemisphere, Asia and South Asian subcontinent broke out border clashes between China and India. Two clashes in the West and in the East almost happened at the same time. China and India share the borders that have not been officially identified, and only along the traditional control lines. There are 3 disputed border sections: the East, Middle, and the West. The East section is also called South of Tibet, with size of more than 90,000 square kilometers. During the border clash in 1962, China took this area back. It was China who withdrew, India returned and established Arunachal Pradesh in 1987. In the middle, the size of a disputation is about 2,000 square kilometers. The west section is called Aksai-Chin, where India regards as part of Ladakh, Kashmir, with a size of more than 30,000 square kilometers. The border clash of Garvan Valley in June 2020 and occurred in this area. China and India had a massive border clash from October 20th, 1962 to November 21st, with China winning overwhelmingly and India suffered great loss in defeat, to which it still tries to revenge until today. China-India border clash and the Cuban Missile Crisis broke out simultaneously with the U.S.-Soviet confrontation for a possible global nuclear war. In the China-India war was a regional conflict for which America and the Soviet were too busy to care, and the Chinese leaders chose a good time. About the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, there are a few points. First is the reason for Cuban Missile Crisis was the Soviets' deployment of nuclear warheads in Cuba. If a global nuclear war broke out with US-Soviet mutual destruction, then the whole world might perish with them together, for their nuclear power could destroy the Earth for many times. The issue is this a rational or reasonable policy? Why the two superpowers fight for hegemony and all the rest of the world that have to be deeply entangled? Nuclear weapons is kind of an ultimate weapon, the last resort for national survival, which means mutual destruction. A nuclear war will be the end of mankind. The second is the Cuban Missile Crisis was the standoff between the two big powers. Right now, the Soviet collapsed and China rose again and replaced the position of former Soviet Union, being regarded as a major menace to the West. Then in the future, will similar missile crisis happen between China and America? For sure, the Soviet is no more. Yet the Russia is still a big power, so the Russia-Ukraine clash occur inevitably, and for the Sino-US relations, Taiwan issue is the point. The third is America was determined to wage war, even a nuclear war against the Soviet, because Moscow deployed aggressive weapons at Cuba, its backyard. Yet today, America insisted on selling weapons to Taiwan, even considering stationing troops or providing tactic nuclear weapons to China's Taiwan. Then what is the difference between America's Taiwan policy today and the adventure of former Soviet Union in Cuba? Might be a bigger crisis will surely happen. History should be the best teacher. Here comes the end of today's program, and thank you for your watching, and see you next time. Thank you, bye.